Hello everybody, welcome to the latest edition of the Front Page. Lots as ever to talk about, and doing the talking are myself, Lee Mottershad, and I'm joined by my Racing Post colleagues, Maddy Playle here. Hello Maddy.
Hi Lee.
Hello. And in his Paris abode, our French correspondent, Monsieur Scott Burton. Hello Scott.
Hello there Lee and Maddy, hope you're all well.
And we hope you're all well too, and I think you will be better if you have the chance to read our big jump off, our jump season preview pullout. It came out in today's edition, Monday's edition of the Racing Post. You'll be able to buy it separately via the Racing Post shop. It's available for Ultimate members on the Digi newspaper app, and there will be a PDF version available to buy soon. Maddy, I've been involved in this, you've been involved in this. Sell the big jumper for us, it's very easy to sell.
Yeah, our names are there in the small print, Lee.
Yeah.
Lee Mottershad and Maddy Playle. I just get in on the front page, so delighted. Yes, obviously, incredible job done by Tom Park, who edits and helps produce the big jump off, and I genuinely say this, having just spent a good hour flicking through it. I think it's one of the best things we do.
Yeah.
Really impressive. Jam-packed with stats, analysis. There's something for everyone in there. You've got loads of horses to follow, that sort of thing, dark horses, but also some sort of deeper stuff about punting strategy and some things to bear in mind on that front. So would advise everyone to go out and get it. I do think it's tremendous value in today's paper. I commented mainly on the 2 Mile Chasers section. Absolutely gutting, of course, that we're probably not going to see a Nergamine this year, so that gave us some last-minute heartbreak when we were filing this. But yeah, El Fabiolo looks an absolute superstar, so it was nice to delve into his form a little bit and just remind ourselves what we've got to look forward to in the next couple of months. Obviously, the showcase meeting at Cheltenham gets underway Friday, Saturday, and then the November meeting next month. I'm fully getting into jumps mode now, and this supplement's really helped me on that front. And also, I sent a message to Tom Siegel this morning saying, has anyone ever told you that you're a bit of a genius? Because his tips, his anti-post tips, I think he put up Korak Rambler this time last year at 33 to 1, and he's gone for another horse in the Grand National. And as soon as I read it, I thought, God, he's just a bit good, isn't he?
He's a bit good.
So yeah, I think it's fantastic. Get your hands on it.
Yeah, it's got interviews as well with Paul Nicholls. There's a piece from Patrick Mullins. All our top tipsters have got I've got their thoughts expressed in the big jump off. 72 pages, ton of reading in there. I was particularly pleased myself to see a horse I tipped in there was given a very positive reception by Patrick Mullins in his piece, Ballyburn, I think 6 to 1. For the Ballymore. That's my only jumps anti-post tip so far. There might be more after this. What's your one horse that you're taking out at the moment?
I'm going to give you two. And I'm not going to spoil you with the details, or certainly not as many details are in there, but we were asked to give 2 horses to follow, and mine were Lucinda Russell's Gio Vinco and Paul Nicholls' In the Waterside. Okay,
those are Maddy's names. Scott, have you got a horse that you're looking forward to for this jump season?
I absolutely have, actually. The current reigning French champion hurdler, Telem, is owned by a family in Yorkshire, the sons and daughters of the late Jim Gordon. He's been fiercely impressive all around Auteuil, but I know that they're itching to give him a go in Britain. He's trained by Arnaud Shea, who's had runners and winners in Britain down the years, very, very experienced. And I think if Telem comes and has a go at one of the big staying prizes, I think he'll be very, very interesting. So I'm very much hoping that they take the plunge.
Well, that would be great if he came across this season. Of course, Cheltenham starts its season on Saturday. Ed Chamberlain will be presenting that coverage for ITV. He has written the foreword on pages 2 and 3 of the big jump off as well. And in terms of also great AV video content, we have a video preview linked to the big jump off, which you can watch as well. So lots to talk about the upcoming core part of the jump season, but the main thrust of flat racing in Britain came to an end for 2023 at Ascot on Saturday. Yes, we've got a Group 1 at Donny this weekend, but Champions Day really brought the show to a close, and guess what, Maddy? F. Dettori stole that show.
He did. I think there's a bit of cynicism around that people are sick of hearing about him now at this point. But at the end of the day, There is no other Frankie Dettori. We saw that by the reaction of the crowd singing, "Oh, Frankie Dettori at Ascot" on Saturday. And he's still riding out of his skin. A double on Champions Day for him. Could have so easily been 3 with Kinross, just nosed out of things by Art Power. But I think for me, the thing that really stood out on Saturday was Dettori's patience and his experience come into the fore. We saw it on Trawlerman in the way that Frankie, he did pursue Maxident, the runaway leader for Ammo Racing, and then allowed Kyprios to go past him. This is in the Long Distance Cup, of course, and then sort of cleverly angled Trawlerman back out for a second bite of the cherry when Kyprios was probably just tiring, idling, whatever you want to call it, and got back up. And then in the big race, as if Hollywood had scripted it itself, King of Steel, a horse who has been a little bit unlucky, arguably, in the Derby and then in the Irish Champion Stakes, where connections weren't too happy with the ride, hence why Dettori was on board for the first time on Saturday. He's a sensitive horse. As much as he's this big, muscly brute of an animal, I think he takes some knowing and he takes some kidding. And Dettori didn't panic when he broke quite slowly and settled towards the rear. He said he absolutely hated the ground and he just had to not panic and almost allow his horse to find his stride. And we saw that, and the horse responded brilliantly to his urgings in the closing stages to get back up and beat Via Sistina and win the Champions Stakes to the joy of the raucous crowd. But it wasn't just the Frankie Dettori show on Saturday. Some other excellent performances. For me, a day when I see Art Power on a racetrack is always a nice one. It makes me smile. And 40-1, I mean, he's one of those, you knew he was going to have his big day at some point, but we didn't think he'd necessarily do it like that and take half the track to pull up again under David Allen. It was a first Group 1 for him, and a very good day for the North too. Carl Burke and Sam James, another jockey to ride his first Group 1 winner aboard Poptronic in the filly and mares. So it's a bit of everything really on the final day of the flat season. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Will we see Frankie again? I'm not sure on these shores. I think he might be tempted by a comeback to Royal Ascot next year. But I think, in my mind, this would have been the perfect opportunity for him to just bow out, cut it clean, and that be the end. Because, let's face it, you're not going to get much better than that. And what's he going to be riding at Royal Ascot next year? I think John Gosden's probably going to be establishing his new jockey ranks in Frankie's absence while he goes off and rides in California. So what, return to Royal Ascot to ride a couple of Wesley Ward juveniles? Is that really going to match what he achieved on Saturday? I'm not sure. I think it was the perfect ending to a varied and storied career, one that's had plenty of highs as well as a couple of lows. But that's now the question, I guess. That's how we throw this forward. What happens next?
Yeah, it's an interesting, well, it's a fascinating question, and it's one I'm sure that will keep debates going in the early months of next year. I hear what you say about, would he just want to come back for rides for Wesley Ward? But equally, if you are John and Daly Gosden and you have, say, in Spiral running in the Queen Anne Stakes, for an owner who adores Frankie Dettori, there surely would be a temptation to ring him up and say,
a filly that takes a bit of knowing as well, clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he would still be in demand. I think what was particularly striking on Saturday was one of the reasons for this retirement being postponed is he has been so much in demand because he's been riding so well.
Yeah.
And as you talked about there, Maddy, the rides on Trawlerman and King of Steel were first class. I mean, I think you can argue that he was the difference between victory and defeat in both races. Yeah. I mean, on John Gosden made that point on Trawlerman, that when Ryan Moore went past him on Kyprios at the start of the straight, Frankie could have panicked and really gone after the horse straight away, but he actually gave him a bit of time and was quite composed about it. So he rode brilliantly. And I referenced in the piece from Ascot on Saturday, it was all about him. It's always been about him. And there was, again, the most enormous public reaction to him. There is nobody else in this sport now, and perhaps even in the past, who would have received that sort of public reaction on a racecourse. The noise when Trawlerman rallied and got past Kyprios, and when King of Steel went to the front past the filly in the Champion Stakes. The noise was incredible, and the reception for him afterwards was amazing as well. And he really does sell the sport in a way that nobody else has and nobody else really can.
Being there, do you think he genuinely was sort of touched and found it surprising, the reaction to his success? Because you've spent a lot of time around him, with him over the years. What did you feel that he was feeling at that time?
Yeah, I think he was very touched. I think the really interesting line he gave was he kept talking through the previous weeks and months at how he was certain to cry on Champions Day. But yes, he's like, I was too happy to cry. And I think he really did love every second of it. And I think he is somebody who, because he's spoken about it himself, goes through emotional highs and lows. I think he does feed off adoration and affection.
Yeah.
And I think he's someone, there are people in the sport, there are top sports people who probably can be quite cold about it and don't really bother if they're getting an amazing reception. But I think Frankie does feed off it. He's a confidence jockey. And when he's getting that sort of reaction from people, I think that does help him. Now, it will be different in America because they don't really engage with the participants in quite the same way that we do over here. And he's not as big a name over there. In some ways, that would be great because he won't be as much in demand. But at the same time, he won't get that immediate feedback that he gets over here.
I just think it could be almost a bit of a damp squib if that's how he's to bow out. I mean, don't get me wrong, he rode fantastically over there at the start of this season, and I remember speaking to John Gosden out in Dubai back in March, and he sort of said, look, this was transformative for Dettori. You'll remember they had their big falling out last year, and he really thought the lifestyle and the way of riding over there suited him, and I have no doubt that it will again. But yes, there's a lot more prize money over there, and yes, he's only going to be racing a couple of times a week, but are the races going to give him that same buzz as the one he received on Saturday? I'm not sure, but I suppose there is this idea of almost weaning himself off the sport, and maybe that's what he's going to try and do with the move. Yeah,
and of course, if he does go and land himself a major chance in the Kentucky Derby, that will massively fuel him because he's spoken about wanting to win that race. He also wants to win the Melbourne Cup, and it will be interesting to see what happens tomorrow, Maddy, because
he's going to struggle to find a ride now, isn't he?
Well, in terms of the Melbourne Cup, I'm more thinking that the Trawlerman ride, there's a suggestion that he might well have broken the whip rules on Trawlerman.
Yeah.
And the whip review committee meets tomorrow. It will be interesting if Frankie's ride on Trawlerman is one of those they look at, because when you look at the video, it's hard to tell from my perspective if he uses the whip 6, 7 or 8 times. If it's more than 6, he's in trouble, and he would be ruled out of well,
it'd be another big jockey sort of worrying about international targets then, because Holly Doyle is appealing a ban she received that's going to rule her out of the Breeders' Cup.
Absolutely.
So that's a concern for her. I think she's appealing this week, either Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah, so jockeys with sweaty palms over the coming days. Scott, one jockey that might have been forgiven having sweaty palms before the Queen Elizabeth II Stakes was already in the Metro, because his ride on Blue Rose Sen in the Nassau Stakes had received some criticism, but you wouldn't have realised that watching him on Saturday.
It takes an enormous amount of confidence, doesn't it, to go out on that ground and blaze away like that. And I spoke to Aurelian and Christopher yesterday at St. Cloud. Christopher was saying that watching from the stands, he just felt sure that the others were going to come back to Big Rock at some stage. But it was to use Christopher's own words, a ballsy ride, and he just got it spot on, didn't he? And they just never looked like getting to him. He's a very, very level-headed guy, Aurelian. He doesn't get too high when things go well. He doesn't get too low when they don't. I was at Ascot last year when they had Sibylla Spain withdrawn at the start for playing up in the stalls in the Duke of Cambridge Stakes, and it was, you would imagine, the most sort of deflating, despondent type thing, and Aurelian was pretty upset by that. Christopher was completely and utterly just, these things happen, we'll be back, we'll come back to Britain, this won't put us off, worse things happen at sea kind of thing. Just a very, very good combination like that. They kind of grew up together. I think Christopher's father's yard, Freddie Head's yard, Aurelian was apprenticed to Freddie, and they're just very, very solid team together, and it was a fantastic performance.
How good a performance was it, do you think, Scott? I mean, it was a bizarre race to watch, in the sense that obviously he's gone off at an incredible speed, but he's maintained it on ground. He clearly handled very well, but you've got Paddington has obviously run nowhere near his summer form. He was in front of Chaldean, who was well beaten, albeit his 2,000 guineas form now looks very ordinary by 2,000 guinea standards, but you had Nashwa was well beaten, Tahir was beaten almost 7 lengths. It's hard to quantify how good a horse we've got in Big Rock.
It is. It's one of those occasions I'm really, really pleased I'm not a Racing Post handicapper or an official handicapper. It is very, very hard to. We beat, as you say, 5 Group 1 winners. It's a strange thing to look back at the results from Saturday. We obviously knew that it was going to be very, what John Gosden calls specialist ground.
Yeah.
Definitely on the straight track, and even as it transpired, having switched to the inner track, plenty of rain had got into that. They were kicking plenty up there. The finishing sectionals for the races on the round course were nothing to get excited about. They were all slow motion finishes, and so it is, to me, quite hard to rate those performances really very highly. You have to assume that the likes of Tahira and Nashwa and definitely Paddington have underperformed in a race like that. But the great thing about Big Rock is he can do it under virtually any circumstances. He can do it round a bend, he can do it on a straight track. He didn't quite get home in the Prix du Jockey Club, but he'd certainly stay 9 furlongs for races like the Prix d'Ispahan and the Dubai Turf if they wanted to go that way. And he can do it on all kinds of ground. He's looked a little bit vulnerable on quick ground. Inspiral obviously picked him off late on. Ace Impact picked him off in the Jockey Club. But with a little bit of dig in the ground, he's a very, very solid citizen. Great news, Christopher said yesterday that the owner and he had discussed it on Saturday evening, and he definitely stays in training next year. And I think you'll probably see him in a Queen Anne, in a Jacques Le Marois, in a QE2. That straight mile, which puts that little bit of extra emphasis on stamina, really sort of brings him out. And he's an imposing looking horse. You imagine he's going to be even stronger at 4. So even though second half of the season he'll have to be giving away weight to whichever good 3-year-olds we see next year, I think he's going to be a fixture. And the way they campaign this horse and the way they campaign Blue Rose Sen as well means that there's no hiding place. If you've got a top class Group 1, he's going to be in it.
You mentioned the straight mile there, Scott. He's liking for straight miles. I do wish, and I said this in the commentary, that the QE2 was run around the round old mile as it used to. I just find, don't know what you think, Maddy, that so many good races that used to run on straight tracks and now run used to be on round tracks, now run on straight tracks. The QE2 is one example. The Futurity we've got at Doncaster on Saturday used to be a round mile race, now it's a straight mile. The Mayhill Stakes, the Hungerford Stakes, the Fred Darling Stakes. I think visually, races around a round track are easier to enjoy than straight course races. That 1 mile start on the straight course at Ascot, they're a little dot in the distance. Well, to an extent they're on the round course, but I just think they're more interesting to watch.
Yeah, it adds another dimension to it, doesn't it? And I think also in the spring and the summer, when you've got all those sprint handicaps over the straight course, it can be nice to have something different. But that said, Lee, I am absolutely I don't want to take away from what Big Rock achieved with this. I think, there are people who are keen to rightly point out that some of his rivals underperformed, but I think even on good to soft ground, I think he would have put in a similar performance. Just the mechanics of the way he moved in the early stages, how his stride was and the rhythm he got into. I don't think there's many horses who could have matched that. Perhaps on good ground there would have been a different result, but I think, to be a champion horse, you need to be able to operate in these conditions. Frankel had to do it, so why shouldn't the others?
Yeah, there's no doubt, Maddy, he is a really good horse, and it was a really good day on Saturday at Ascot. You might well have been helped in your pursuit of finding winners by our new look race cards on the Racing Post app. They have developed considerably since our most recent update. They are really, really good. More details here.
You spoke, we listened. Introducing Race Cards Redefined. 3 brand new and unique race cards tailored for your needs. Our new and improved standard race card is the punter's favourite and is everything you need to make your selection. Get the maximum amount of information in the palm of your hand with Expert View. Cover all areas and get all the same information as our newspaper. With Compact View, you can make a quick decision on who to back. View more runners and more odds on one race. Which race card will you choose?
Yeah, do make sure you've got the latest version of the app updated to benefit from those new look race cards. Second story now, and something else that is going to be new is racing. British racing looks like it has finally achieved its long-held ambition of securing a series similar to the Drive to Survive series, which has done so much to increase fan engagement and involvement in F1, and similar series across so many other sports. For many sports, that sort of docuseries has been a real holy grail mission. Now, racing has had some success on that front with Taking the Reins, which followed Joe Tizard and was available on the Racing Post YouTube channel, and Horsepower, which looked at the Andrew Balding stable and Asheen Murphy and was on the Amazon Prime platform. But on this occasion, horse racing has succeeded in finding a programme, a series that will cover the entire sport. The working title of this programme is Champions. It will begin filming at Kempton on Boxing Day and go right through until the Cheltenham and Aintree Spring Festivals. And crucially, it will be broadcast on ITV's main channel, ITV1, in a prime time 9 p.m. slot across 6 episodes late summer next year. That is being regarded by British racing as a massive success. It's being supported by the Flutter bookmaking organisation that has Sky Bet, Paddy Power and Betfair. They are supporting it in terms of producing the programming. Racecourse Media Group has been integral to its establishment as well. An independent production company called South Shore will be delivering the programmes, and key to those programmes, we are told, is the desire to find characters to really sell the sport. It's not just simply going to be about trying to find the biggest names in the sport. They want to find really engaging individuals who will help to present a picture of horse racing, jump racing to mainstream ITV viewers next summer that will really help in terms of getting people involved and interested in horse racing. It feels, Maddy, like a massive win all round.
I think so, Lee. Should talk from my own experience in that I used to watch Formula One with my granddad when I was very young, and the Drive to Survive series really sort of rebirthed that interest in F1 for me. Clearly did a good job at that. You know, you only have to look at the statistics surrounding F1 and how well it did initially. Maybe now it's going down slightly, but and other documentaries as well, similar series have been successful. I watched some of the golf edition and the tennis as well. I just think this is fantastic news. It's really going to give racing an opportunity to sell itself. And I think one of the key, we should say, by the way, this is already on today's front page. Yeah. So you've already won this edition of the show. The paragraph in your story that stood out for me was the following: casting for the 6 one-hour shows is due to begin this month, with South Shore keen to focus not necessarily on the sport's top stars, but individuals with whom the public is most likely to engage. Now, with Horsepower, one of the critiques for me was, as much as we love Andrew Balding and Asheen Murphy, there was just something about their characters that I feel didn't necessarily resonate wider. And I think the jumps, I argued at the time, as much as I enjoyed it, the jumps was a much better candidate for this sort of programme, given the longevity of the animals, given some of the characters involved, and given the sort of natural heart that comes from it, and the grassroots. So for me, that's a real key point, is the people they're going to focus on, because I think this is only going to work, A, if there's buy-in from whoever's involved to really embrace the project, and B, if we can showcase the fun side of racing. You know, I think that's what people want to see. They want to feel like they can be involved. They want people to laugh with. They want to understand those people. That's why Drive to Survive worked, because you engaged with the drivers and their stories and you wanted to root for them. And there's so many good candidates for that in jump racing. Maybe not necessarily the big players who you'd expect, but I think this is something that's super, super exciting. And if we can showcase how jump racing is fun, it's a laugh, and, you know, the great people who are involved that we know very well, then that's going to be an excellent thing. I think there's so much potential here. This is a golden opportunity.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think anyone who watched that promotional video for the Welsh Jump Jockeys Derby recently will know there are tons of characters in the weighing room. I will already be pushing for Alan Johns to have a role in this programme. I'm not his agent or anything like that, but I think he'd be great. But so many people would be great in there. Loads of great stories to tell. Scott, I particularly enjoyed recently watching a similar series to this, a Netflix series which focused on last year's Tour de France. That went so well, they're doing again this year. And as Maddy said, key to that and all these series is finding those right characters. They don't need to be household names. The audience watching the series probably wouldn't have heard of any of the big names. Anyone might well not have heard of any of the big names anyway. It's about people who can really tell a story and get the public to be interested in them and therefore the sport as well.
I think that's right. I think obviously with the Netflix documentaries, the Drive to Survive and Full Swing and Breakpoint, which were the golf and the tennis ones, they look like premium products. They look like expensive cinematic television. Obviously, jump racing has got fantastically spectacular backdrop, and you can imagine that being able to use all of ITV's different cameras and also to go behind the scenes, you can paint a similar kind of picture. I think the thing that jump racing will be able to sell itself on is the kind of variety of the different behind the scenes backdrops, the small yards, the big yards, the different personalities. One of the things I felt with Breakpoint was that tennis professionals may all have different personalities, and they got kind of lucky with the people they were following who happened to then have sort of breakthrough years. But they spend 52 weeks of the year in identical hotel rooms. Then they go to the gym. Then they go to warm up, and then they go out and play in an identical looking stadium. And I think the variety that is involved in all horse racing, but specifically obviously in British jump racing, which doesn't particularly look like if you were to watch a series about the flat, you could be watching a series that took in Royal Ascot, which obviously is a little bit different, but I don't know, British Champions Day or the Arc de Triomphe or the British Cup. And there's a certain kind of sort of common visual grammar involved there. And I just think that the Cheltenhams and the Aintreys and the Kemptons, you're looking at lots of very great variety there. And I think from a filmmaker's point of view, that's probably what they're after.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that point you made, Scott, at the top of your segment there about how these programmes have always looked incredibly lavish, incredibly expensive, is a big factor, isn't it? South Shore, the production company doing this, has got a really good track record at producing great content, and it is pretty an added bonus that this will be on. I refer to it as mainstream television, which it is in the sense that Netflix, Amazon Prime, those sort of stream platforms, they're great and they have huge numbers now, but you still have to pay an extra subscription to watch them. So that sort of content is only available to those people who pay that sort of subscription. This will be available to everybody who has a TV. Yes,
and I think one of the things for me I'd like to see as well is just spending a lot of time with these people. I think with the Horsepower documentary, it jumped around quite a lot, which on one hand is good, but in order to really invest in someone's story, for me, you've got to be there and you've got to be alongside them when they're reacting to the different scenarios that they face. So I'm really, really looking forward to it. And when there's often a lot of moaning going on in racing, and we know that there's challenges that the sport are facing. We're going to get onto one of those in a moment. But this is a really positive story, so it's wonderful to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, and it's also wonderful in the sense that jump racing came under pressure last year. The whole sport did, but jump racing in particular on Grand National Day, and we always, I think, worry about the future of the Grand National. We discussed that on this programme last week when we were talking about the changes to the Grand National. But the fact a broadcaster, ITV, albeit it's already involved in the sport, but the fact it's prepared to put out 6 primetime episodes selling jump racing, if you like, that has to be a positive recommendation and nod to jump racing as well, and maybe should give us a little bit more confidence as we approach this jump season. Where we lack a bit of confidence at the moment, in fact a lot of confidence, is in the consequences to the sport of the government's gambling white paper and the government and the Gambling Commission's desire to bring in affordability checks on a formal basis. Scott Burton, your story is linked to this and the findings of the industry's Right to Bet survey.
Yeah, I think this is a very important step in the what seems like a very long story of the review into the 2005 Gambling Act. Primarily, it's a very good illustration of the way that the industry is completely united on this. A little bit similar, I suppose, to the discussions that went around the fixture list, really. But this was a survey that was conducted by the BHA, Sky Sports Racing, Racing TV, and the Racing Post. More than 14,000 people took the time to complete the survey, and the figures are really quite startling. You'll have to excuse me from reading from my notes here. As I say, more than 14,000 people surveyed. The combined total of those people who said that if affordability checks became the norm, they would either bet significantly less or would stop completely is 52.39%. That is 1 in 2 people who bothered to fill in the survey said that if confronted with even light touch affordability checks, they would either significantly decrease or actually stop their engagement in the sport. Now that has huge financial implications for horse racing and for all the ancillary industries that go around it. In terms of those people, there were fewer people who said that they would fill out the survey in terms of whether they'd already been approached by betting companies. Lots and lots of betting companies are really already with us with affordability checks just because they're under so much pressure from the Gambling Commission. And 26.28% of respondents said that they had already been checked by their bookmaker. Now, when we, the Racing Post, conducted the big punting survey, more than 10,000 of you replied to that. That figure was 16.6%. So again, a step change in the number of people who are already having to face this. And you can read the figures for yourself in terms of those people who said that they had either refused to comply or that they had complied and they'd failed. I think I added up that if you added up the figures of those people who had complied with it, there was a 13% failure rate, which again, the Gambling Commission's claim is that this is going to affect a tiny percentage of people, and that the number of people who are going to face these checks will be very much in line with what they consider to be the problem gambling figures, and that is just not borne out by this. Now, you can say surveys, opinion polls can get things wrong. This was a survey that took a little bit of time to fill out. This is not somebody being stopped in the street by a market researcher. People who have actually taken the time to fill in this will again, possibly many people who've also already filled in the Gambling Commission's survey into the proposals, which closed last week as well. So people have taken time to do this, and these are really, really stark figures in terms of not only the extra number of people who've now had to undergo affordability checks since we last checked in with them in February, but also the real determination amongst a really large number of people to actually either switch to a different bookmaker who's not asking them, or just stop completely. And as I say, the financial implications for the sport of horse racing are really quite stark.
Yeah, absolutely right, Scott. I think what's particularly relevant about this piece of research, Maddy, is that it was organised by the BHA in conjunction with the Racing Post, Racing TV and Sky Sports Racing, and therefore it is directed at the sort of people who we know are most likely to be impacted by affordability checks, who already are being impacted by affordability checks, and it is really useful data for the government and the Gambling Commission to look at and get some proper information, intel on how this key group of people are being affected and will be affected.
Yeah, the Racing Post, we've been doing a lot of work recently, haven't we, on punters and getting their voice heard and their experiences. But great to have some numbers and some data to back up that sort of anecdotal experience, if you like. And I think these figures are just hugely worrying, aren't they? Of the 14,000 people who responded to that survey, the number of them who were clearly going to be put off racing and the knock-on effect that's going to have. It's just incredibly alarming, and I think going forward, we just need to know where we stand on this scenario. But we're not going to know, as Scott said, the Gambling Commission's consultation closed last week, and I don't think we're going to hear more on this for a good while now. And confirmation of the white paper, and I don't even think legislation necessarily needs to be changed for these checks to be put into place. So it's all incredibly worrying.
Yeah, I was at Ascot on Saturday, as we discussed earlier on. When I was walking down in the morning, as John Gosden was coming in, having walked the track, a walk of the track that ultimately led to Mottershad not running in the Champion Stakes. And as I was walking down there, race in the grandstand shouted across to me, and he wanted to talk about affordability checks. It's what people are energised by for good reasons. Someone else I was talking to, Maddy, as well on Saturday at Ascot, seasoned political observer, was making a point that I've referenced in the column, how this person thinks that the general election could come in May at the same time as the local elections, and if that is the case, then this whole white paper process very likely wouldn't have been completed, which would mean it would in effect be timed out, which would in turn almost certainly empower the Gambling Commission, because again the power would go back to them to lead on affordability checks without there being any formal guidelines in place. And given what we know about the Gambling Commission and its views on affordability checks historically and now, that would be even more worrying.
It would, and that's interesting. I think one thing that Scott touched upon as well that's important is we know people are already experiencing these checks and they're already being impacted by them, which is worrying, especially if we're going to be waiting even longer than we anticipate for a sort of conclusion. It's how many people are going to be drawn into the black market. And now some of the statistics from the survey did encompass this, but also I think on one hand it's incredibly difficult to get a handle on how accurate those statistics are going to be in future as well. And I think that's a major concern going forward.
Yeah, and again, that's something the Gambling Commission hasn't really hitherto seemingly taken seriously enough.
They seem to think that the number of punters going to the black market will be limited and insignificant, and that's just blatantly not the case from what we've heard.
Yeah, those with a better understanding of the subject think differently. Scott, just before we move on and wrap up the show, this anti-gambling movement agenda, if you like, is something that's not exclusive to Britain. We know there's parallel legislation going on in Ireland. In France, is there any sort of public media political agenda developing against gambling, or is that just not a French thing at the moment?
It's not really a big topic of conversation here. I think largely online sports betting was only legalised in 2010, so we're kind of more we're somewhere between sort of Britain and Ireland and the United States, where obviously state by state things are being opened up almost on a monthly basis. So I don't think there is as much concern here. I feel sure that some politician at some stage will decide that it's a drum worth beating. I think if you look at the British situation, I think the proximity of the general election is actually almost certainly going to put the brakes on this. We obviously had two heavy by-election defeats for the sitting government last week, and I think ironically reform to gambling legislation is probably something that they could actually find broad agreement with the chief opposition with at the moment. I don't think anybody should be fooled into thinking that a Labour government would be any more sympathetic to racing's cause or any less likely to seek ways of at least increasing the pot in terms of the amount of money that can be spent on help for those suffering gambling harm. I just think that in the year before a general election, the government will just not want to go anywhere near anything that looks like cooperation with the opposition. They want to draw a distinction, a line in the sand between this is what we're about and this is what they're about, and anything that they actually agree on is just going to get pushed to one side. So I honestly don't think this is a big priority for the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and I would imagine your political operators' observation that this will get timed out whenever the next general election comes is pretty true. So the unfortunate upshot of that is probably at least another year's worth of uncertainty, and all business abhors uncertainty. It's terrible for racecourse groups at the moment who are trying to fix their prize money for next year, because they have no real idea how this is going to continue to affect their income streams.
I think that's absolutely right, Maddy. Uncertainty is not a good thing, full stop.
It's not. One thing we are certain of, and it should be worth talking about, is horse racing, and the future of it is going to be discussed in Parliament this week on Wednesday. Matt Hancock secured a debate, MP for West Suffolk. I'm not sure of all racing saviours how. I'll leave you guys to make your own opinions on how on Matt Hancock's claims to that. But I'm sure this is a topic that's going to come up then, and racing is facing challenges at the moment, and we need to have our voices heard. So it will be interesting to see the outcomes of that debate.
Time now, though, for my voice to be heard, because it is my job to determine which of these three stories is.
Sound like an evil dictator there.
Been called many things, Maddy. Never an evil dictator. My job to decide who is the winning story presenter in this week's edition, and it's actually quite easy because Maddy has already said that I should win with the story on ITV to broadcast a new horse racing docuseries. It should hopefully do a great amount of work to sell racing to a new audience. It can only be a positive thing, and how many times in racing do we get to say it can only be a positive thing? So with apologies to Scott in Paris and Maddy right next to me in London, my own story is this week's winning story. I thank you. And I also thank Scott in Paris. You set for a great week there, Scott?
Yeah, it's we're building up to in a couple of weeks' time at the big sort of jumps meeting at Auteuil, the kind of our King George equivalent, and before that the Pre-Royal Oak at Longchamp, where there's always plenty of British and Irish interest amongst the stayers. So staying busy.
Fantastic. Maddy, you got a good week?
I tend to play things day by day in this game. We know that as people who work on the news desk, how things can change. But yes, very much looking forward to it. Got so much good racing to come. Breeders' Cup, Melbourne Cup, November meeting. And I was saying to everyone in the office this morning how excited I am for Cheltenham to return on Friday. Yeah, loads to be excited about and loads of reasons, as I say, for you to go out and buy a copy of The Big Jump Off, either in today's edition of the Racing Post or available in many other ways to enjoy that. Enjoy your week, and we will see you again next Monday. Bye-bye.